saw that over there. I was like, all right, time to get out there.
I get to crash WCHL alumni.
Yeah, but then I've got my back. It's such a switcheroo up here?
I know. Oh, that's right. It's aren't they doing that
Join us. Yes, sir. How you doing? What's up, Rotary? I'm not really committed.
I've never played there. Nice. Sit out, Pat.
Hello, how are you doing? Good, very good.
Some are hard to get.
Hello to everyone. Welcome to our weekly meeting. Bob Woodruff has advised me that as Sergeant at Arms, brevity is the Holy Grail, so I will try to do my best to be brief. My name is Meg Oster. I moved with my husband from Chicago to Chapel Hill about 5 years ago. And after having a career filled with leadership positions, about 3 years ago, I decided I was going to eschew all of that and start my own consulting practice, which I did. And I'm having a lot of fun doing that, working with clients in the health science and space and healthcare space, and helping them with customer acquisition and marketing. I had the pleasure of meeting Linda Sanders, and she introduced me to this club, and I became a member in March of 2021. So enough about me. I'd like to ask if any of the members have guests with them today. Well, welcome.
Steve Jones, Ed Campbell, Chelsea,
Okay, here we go. All right. Are there any visiting Rotarians here today? Seems like no. All right. So if you will just for a minute pause for a moment of reflection. As we gather here today, may we be ever mindful of opportunities to render our service to our community. Let us always be a source of hope for fellow citizens in need. We are grateful for our meal and the fellowship of our club. Now, I'm going to pass the fine basket. So I will start that over here. So far, so good. And now, I just want to do a short poem for all of you who have a fondness for statistics. Statistics. Who doesn't love statistics? Having had just a bit too much wine, the statistician opted to decline. Head in the frigid air, feet out in the hot air. On the average, he was feeling fine. So, there we go. Omar, I think you're up next. Thank you for putting up with me as Sergeant Vance today.
Thank you, Meg. How's everyone doing today?
Well,
all right. It's a beautiful Friday. Approaching summer. Also approaching the end of my term as president.
4 years.
We have Vice President Mike here. His induction ceremony is June the 22nd.
22nd.
June 22nd. Want to remind everyone about that at the Carolina Club. We have a sign-up sheet. Are we also doing electronic sign-up sheet, Timmy? Okay. So please sign up. It is included in your dues, so you don't have to.
We are having 3 desserts. 3.
So it should be a wonderful time. We'll send out more details. People were asking me earlier about the dress code. So we'll continue email train just so everyone's on the same page. I would like to recognize Liz. Is Liz here? Is Liz Hinkie here? Okay, we're going to recognize her next week. She received an award recently. Does anyone have any announcements? Linda, does anyone on the board have any announcements they'd like to make? No? Okay. All right, so we're going to get right into it. Today, we have a speaker with us who's a good friend of mine. Most of you know Art Chansky, but many of you may not know that Art and I have a deeply personal connection. Art and I lived together for several years. Well, I would actually say Art lived with my mother, because Art and my mother dated for several years when I was in high school and in college. So, as I brought up a handful of people that I've known for many years, Art is another one of those people. And Art is a wonderful writer, wonderful speaker, very knowledgeable, been here for many years. But I got to tell at least one or two Art Chansky stories while I'm up here before Art does his thing. So, back in high school, as was the case, I would often have a lot of friends over to my house out there in the country. We lived out by Calvander, back before Hogan's Farm was developed. And, we all grew up listening to CHL. If you grew up in Chapel Hill, or if you were an adult in Chapel Hill, you listen to CHL. And that's because there pretty much weren't any other stations to listen to. No disrespect to Jim or anyone involved in radio, but there just weren't a whole lot of radio choices. So you always heard Art on the air doing his sports notebook. And classically, we all know what Art's outro line is. Who knows what Art's outro line is? See ya. So that's been Art's outro line for many years, and inevitably I'd be down in my room in the basement, hanging out with all my friends, doing who knows what. And then, it'd often be time for all of us to leave, and, maybe Art would be hanging out with my mom, and maybe Eddie Fogler, or, some of the assistant coaches. And, my friends always got the greatest kick as we were about to walk out that door. And I'd be like, about to go out the door, and I'd be like, Art, see ya. And that always got a good kick out of, that always got a good rise out of my friends. But probably the best Art story that I wanted to talk about today was, and Art just kind of reminded me of it today. So I was a big hooper, loved basketball, and Art, fancied himself kind of a defensive specialist, an aggressive Boston baller. And so, I'd always be playing ball back then. And so Art was like, hey, you want to play a little one-on-one? And I was like, who is this older man wanting to play me one-on-one? This guy's crazy. So inevitably, we go out to the little concrete basketball court we had outside. And, Art was, I don't think I'd ever had anyone play me that aggressively in my life. It was a mix between basketball and football. Let's put it that way. And no, there was no foul calling. But at the end of the game, well, this is what ended that game. Art was kind of pushing in on me as I went up for a shot, and unintentionally, my elbow made contact with Art's face. And he came back, that's when the game stopped. There was blood, there were stitches, I felt horrible. And Art came back, and, my mom saw Art's face. He came off the court, and she was like, oh my God, what happened? Are you okay? And he's like, who did this to you? What happened? And he said to my mom, Omar did that to me. And she said, well, you'll be all right. At that point, it wasn't that big of a deal. But I'm very excited to have you here today, Art. Thanks for coming to speak with us. So without further ado, please welcome a dear friend of mine, Art Kinsey.
Thanks, Al. Okay, great to be here, and I'm gonna get my notes out. I've been here before, a few years ago. I had to be very careful for various reasons about some of the things that I said a few years ago when I was here, but I don't have to be careful today, so it goes on from what the introduction was. I just want to tell you how Sports Notebook started. You know it, it's Art Chansky, SIA. It's been going on for a long time, and I want to tell you how it started. In the early 70s, I was working in Atlanta for the Atlanta Constitution, and I listened to the radio down there. There was no streaming podcast or Pandora or anything like that. And they had a guy on the radio, a young guy named Bo Block, and I was listening as I was driving there and I was working. Bo Bach gave commentaries on the radio. He gave his opinion on commentaries. And then later that day, he also had a show where people could call in and ask him questions, and they would get into arguments and debating and all that. I thought it was the greatest thing that I ever heard. So when I came back about a year later to become the sports editor for the Des Moines Herald, I went to Jim Hebner, who has been and still is a good friend, and I was stringing for Jim all the way back when I was in college. And I said, hey, you're a radio guy. A guy in Atlanta named Bo Bach. He has a commentary and a call-in show. It's fabulous. And you ought to do that at CHL. And he said, that sounds great. And I got the perfect person to do that. And I said, yeah, who? He said, Jim Lampley. And I know Jim was here a few weeks ago. He's a good friend. He brought the house down, and he was absolutely the best guy to do it. But a year later, Jim became the first sideline reporter ever on live television with ABC. They had conducted a nationwide search, and Jim won it. And he went from making, I think this is right, Jim, $80 a month for WCHL to $80,000 a year for ABC. And in today's dollars, that's $450,000. So that's how Jim Lampley left. He's back in Chapel Hill, and he and I are working on a memoir together, his memoir. But that's how Sports Notebook became, and I've done some research on this. Since 1975, when I started, I've done more than 7,500 sports notebooks. And as the tagline you know is SIA. But it's a perfect medium for me because it's only 2 minutes long, and I can, I have enough institutional knowledge that I can take an opinion, I can bullshit anything. And if you listen to it, you probably hear that. The funniest sports notebook story that I have to tell you is around the 1977 East Regional in College Park, Maryland. We were playing Notre Dame on St. Patrick's Day. And if you remember, it was a Thursday night, and Phil Ford hyperextended his elbow at the end of the game, but went to the free throw line and made the 2 crucial free throws that won the game. And then we went on to play Kentucky on Saturday and won that as well to get to the Final Four, beat Vegas, and had that heartbreaking loss to Marquette. But that night, that Thursday night, that game, I went out to party with Mitch Kupchak, who was at that time a rookie for the Washington Bullets. And we were partying and having a great time. We had just won an unbelievable game against, imagine beating Notre Dame on St. Patrick's Day. It was incredible. So at about 12 o'clock at night, I looked, I said, oh shit, oh my God, I still got to do Sports Notebook. So I went and got some paper and I wrote down my sports notebook. And I went to a payphone and I called up. There was always somebody at the station, so I made a collect call and I recorded it over them. And I have no idea what I said other than the first line. I remember it said something like, it was St. Patrick's Day, but the Tar Heels had the luck of the Irish. And then it went on and on. And so as what happened occasionally, Dean Smith, he slept late because he was always up late at night watching film. So he always missed Sports Notebook in the morning, and during the afternoon airing, he was coaching basketball or something like that. So, but occasionally this would happen. And on Monday morning, my phone rang, and I picked it up, and it was Linda Woods, the great Linda Woods. She said, "Oh, this is Linda calling from Coach Smith's office. He would like to see your script from the Friday Sports Notebook." And I said, "Well, Linda, I would bring it over, but I have no idea where it is. I think it's on a crumpled sheet of paper in a phone booth in College Park, Maryland." And so I couldn't do that. But that is the last time that I ever was not able to deliver that script to Coach Smith. So a couple of things you need to know about me, and some of it's in this great sheet that preceded. I did start Four Corners in 1979 when there was liquor by the drink. It just come to North Carolina. We were in the height of our sports prowess at Carolina, and Eddie Fogler and I were best buddies at the time. We would travel. He would travel around recruiting and with the team, and I would travel around covering him. And we could never believe that Chapel Hill didn't have a sports bar. And we'd go to other college towns, and they all had sports bars, and it was because there was liquor by the drink. You know, you couldn't really do it unless you could have a bar where you could pour drinks. So we started Four Corners in 1979, and I'm proud to say that it is the second longest existing restaurant in Chapel Hill to this day, behind the Carolina Coffee Shop, which of course is 200 years old. But when you think of all the restaurants that have come and gone, and Four Corners is still there, I don't have anything to do with it anymore, but I'm very proud. And Christian Bacham, who owns it, does a fantastic job. I also started the Poop Sheet with Dennis Weissig. Back then it was a scurrilous newsletter where we put a lot of rumors and recruiting together, folded it up into a newsletter, sent it off to mailing lists in an envelope. And today, today every blog, every Facebook post that you see has the same thing that Poop Sheet had 40 years ago, and that's rumors and recruiting. So I was very happy that we were the forerunners to that. A couple of other things about me that you should know is, one is I really like the sport of football better than basketball. Now, ACC basketball and Carolina basketball is something special, but I do like the sport of football better. And besides all the sports that I cover and write about, I am more passionate about politics than I am about any of those sports. We won't get into a political discussion, but I just wanted you to know that. I'm what I call an objective homer. I write long form stuff, and I've authored 10 books, as you know, including Game Changers, this is right now, which should, I think, be requested or required reading for all UNC alumni and fans, because it tells the story. It's really my version, or the Southern version of JFK's Profiles in Courage. It tells the story about how Dean Smith and Charlie Scott combined to integrate Carolina basketball and Carolina athletics in the 1960s. And it's a story about basketball, but it's really more of a story about Chapel Hill, Durham, North Carolina in the Civil Rights era. And when you remember, a lot of guys here remember that era, Chapel Hill, man, it had to be a liberal faculty, but it was mostly a southern town, like a lot of other southern towns, with black and white restrooms, black and white water fountains. They didn't even have black and white changing dressing rooms in stores, because if you were black, you couldn't go in and try anything on. So what those guys did, and this is, you have to remember, Charlie Scott was 17 years old when he came here. He had never lived in a white society. He grew up in East Harlem and then went to high school at Laurinburg Institute. He came to Chapel Hill. He was one of 55 blacks in a student body of 13,000. Dean Smith hadn't won anything. He had succeeded Frank McGuire as the coach, who had the magical 1957 undefeated team. And Dean, Chuck Erickson, those other guys, they wanted another big name. They were against Dean Smith. But Bill Aycock was his advocate. Bill hired him because he got to know Dean off the court, and he recognized not only did he know basketball, but he was a guy of great integrity. So Dean hadn't won anything. Charlie Scott comes from Harlem and Laurinburg Institute. Dean Smith comes from Kansas. But the commonality is that Dean's father, Alfred Smith, integrated high school basketball in Kansas in the 1930s. And some of the things that happened when Dean was, like a mascot for the Emporia basketball team in the 30s, happened exactly the same way when Dean became the coach of the Tar Heels. There's one story, when Dean was 10 years old, the Emporia team was going to play a game at the Jayhawk Hotel in Lawrence, Kansas, and was going into the Jayhawk Hotel to have a meal. And there was a kid named Chick Taylor, who was Alfred Smith's second black player. And when the manager of the hotel saw Chick Taylor, he told Alfred Smith and his team that they couldn't eat here, or Chick would have to eat in the back room. Alfred Smith stormed out of the restaurant with the team. About 30 years later, the Tar Heels were in Georgia Tech to play a game. This was before Georgia Tech was in the ACC. And Dean had Bill Guthridge and Randy Forehand, the manager, make an arrangement at a restaurant in downtown Atlanta after they had gotten in, had a practice the day before the game, went to the hotel, and showed up. And when they walked in, the receptionist or the hostess saw this big 6'5" black guy, and she said, "I'll be right back." She went back and got the manager, and the manager came back and and said the same thing. This is 30 years later, and said, "Yeah, you guys come in, but Charlie, he'll have to eat somewhere else." And Dean said, "We're out of here." Walked out, and they didn't no credit cards at that time. And so Dean might have had an idea that it might happen, but he had a wad of cash in his pocket. So he turned around and he gave it to Randy Forehand and Bill Guthridge, and he said, "Give this to the players. Tell them they can eat anywhere. Be back at the hotel at 9 o'clock." And every kid on that team that I talked to, a lot of them, for this book, Game Changers, thought Dean did that because he was going back to the hotel and holy hell, riot act, whoever made that decision. Because that's the way he was. And it was in his DNA. So this story, I think it needs to be required reading by everybody, because the young kids today, they just think, hey, we've got a great basketball program here. Where did it come from? You just wake up with a great basketball program. It was because two courageous guys, kids, 17 years old, 55 guys, and most of those 55, they started the black student movement at UNC, and they were banging on Charlie and Bill Chamberlain all the time to join us, support our 23 demands for Carlisle citizen, or say you're not going to play basketball anymore. They wouldn't do that, but that was the kind of pressure, and Dean was trying to shepherd them through that whole thing at the time. So, I mean, it's an incredible story. Now, the converse to that is that Charlie, there was a kid at Duke named C.B. Claiborne who was a year older than Charlie, and when Charlie was visiting schools, he went to Duke and spent some time with C.B. And C.B. told him, "Don't come here." Charlie said, "Don't come here?" "Yeah, don't come to Duke. Duke is not ready for you." And Charlie said, "How come?" He said, "Well, they're not ready. I'm telling you, I sit at the end of the bench. I'm as good as anybody on the team. I sit at the end of the bench, and the only thing Vic Boobers tells me every day is, cut your afro down. Cut your afro down." So they're not ready for us. And the proof in the pudding in that is that was 1966. Well, it was 1977, 10 years later, before Duke got a really quality black player named Gene Banks, who Bill Foster beat Dean Smith for. So those are the kinds of things that Charlie had to put up with. Now, when he came to visit here on his recruiting visit, they put on the dog for him. Dean brought him to Binkley Baptist. He brought a couple of African-American professors who were teaching subjects that Charlie was interested in. And so, but it was a dog and pony show for recruiting. Dick Grubar took him to the KA house. Can you imagine Dick Grubar taking Charlie Scott to the KA house in 1966? He called him up and he said, "I'm bringing a guy over, and you guys better welcome him, because this is the guy who's going to help us kick Duke and State's ass." All right?
I was there.
Right. Cliff was there. But when Charlie came, he couldn't go back to the KA house, obviously, and he couldn't go to Larry Miller at the Airing House to hang out with the football team, all-white football team. He couldn't go anywhere. And his savior, his freedom, where he felt the safest, was between the lines of the basketball court. But he did find out from the other black students on campus that the social life for us is happening at Central. And that's what Charlie did. He played basketball here, he went to class here, he studied here, but on the weekends and sometimes at night, he went over to Central. And that's where he met his wife, Margaret Holmes, who's the only person on the planet to interview Margaret Holmes. She was married to the most popular black, probably, I don't know, maybe Jim, maybe the most popular black athlete for sure, maybe the most famous black man in North Carolina at the time. And that's how Charlie did it, and that's how he got through. And it was really important for him to make it through. And Dean knew that too, because it would be another Duke situation. If Charlie Scott, this Valley who recruit, came to Chapel Hill and didn't make it, who was coming after him? But Bill Chamberlain came, and then Ray Harrison came from Greensboro, and then a kid named, I think, Rocky Mount Phil Ford, something like that, he came. And then after that, Dudley Bradley, and all the way up to James Worthy, Sam Perkins, Michael Jordan, all that kind of stuff. So that's why this book is important. And Matt Andrews, who teaches a course called Sport and Race at UNC, this is required reading for every one of his classes, and it's been going on for 6 years. And it's really important because the young people have to understand that. This book sold like crazy for us, but the young people don't seem to care about history as much as we do. They've got everything on their phone right now. Everything is at the moment. But it's important for everybody to understand and respect what a great program we have, because two guys, profiles in courage, put themselves on the line to make it happen. Okay, so now I'm an objective homer. That's what you can call me when I write. I write long form stuff, and I've authored all these books. But my idea is I love my school. I love my university more than anybody who works there. So to me, I don't really care who the athletic director is, or the football coach or the basketball coach. I just want to make sure that we have the best person in those jobs, the person who can make us as good possibly as we can be. Now, we're not going to go pay a football coach $10 million like Alabama, or a basketball coach $10 million like Duke. But we're going to pay coaches well, and we want them to make us the best that we can possibly be. And so, to me, it's like, remember the old airport movies years ago? Dean Martin was in it, and there was 5 of them, I think. The whole thing was the plane. The plane was the thing. The plane would take off, and there would be weather, terrorism, bombing, somebody sick on the plane. And the crisis was what is the pilots in the plane going to do? Because get that plane down, save the plane, and save the people. So to me, that's what UNC is to me. I fight with Steve Kirshner about this all the time. I don't really care who's in a job, but if the guy's not doing the job that I think is the best possible job that he can do for UNC, I'm going to write about it. And so Butch Davis, I wrote about Butch Davis being a bad fit for Carolina, who might get us in trouble long before he proved to be a bad fit for Carolina and got us in trouble. So Hatzel got mad at me because I kept writing that it was time for her to go. She had been a big winner, but the program was fading, and there was a lot of controversy. So the best coach and best athletic director is important to me. I haven't criticized Bubba yet because I like Bubba and I think he does a good job. But occasionally over the years, I made Dean mad, I made Bill Dooley mad. Roy was different. Roy listened to the radio, but he didn't read, anything that much. So, and he really didn't care. He just kept on coaching. Now, I said to Omar when I said I'd come, I'd talk about a little bit of the past, the present, and the future of Carolina athletics. And what I always say when I talk about this is, we have to think about how lucky we were that 3 things happened. The first thing is, how lucky were we that Roy Williams said yes again the second time he was asked to be the basketball coach here in 2003. Remember, he turned it down in 2000 to stay at Kansas. And then after that came the infamous Matt Doherty year. And Roy, things that happened in Kansas, stuff had changed. He got a chance to come back in 2003, and look what happened, 3 national championships and everything. How lucky were we to do that? Because, all the great basketball programs, Kentucky, UCLA, all these, they had these great eras, and then there was a lull for 10 years. In Kentucky, there was a lull after Joe B. Hall and Adolph Rupp until Rick Pitino got there. At UCLA, there was a long lull after John Wooden retired, where like 5 former players tried to take the job before they got back on track. So we were very lucky about that. Now, the second thing is, how lucky were we that Matt Brown, at 68 years old, said he would come back here out of retirement and coach football here. That's unbelievable, because at Carolina, football, football's a tough putt for all the football coaches, because if you don't have it going by October, where all the attention is turning, right? It's turning to hoops. So when Mac Brown decided he would come back out of retirement, he was the only guy. Larry Fedora had done great his first couple of years, and his program started to flounder a little bit. The last 2 years, they were terrible, and people were excited. Then they lost a game, they were disappointed. They lost more games, they got angry, and then finally, apathy, when nobody came and nobody cared. And that's where we were. And if anybody that we hired after Bubba fired Fedora, everybody, Scott Satterfield, anybody like that, we would have said, okay, that's great. Let's see how he does on the field. Mac Brown could come back and sell that stadium out before they ever played a game in his second year. And he did it. And so, what would happen to that program if Mac hadn't decided to do that? Now, I know Mac's a lightning rod, and I love Mac. I've known him since his first stint. I fixed him up with his wife, Sally. But his hype is bigger than his reality sometimes. And he's got to live up to his own hype sometimes. But his hype is the thing that sells the stadium. Yeah, so, and the third thing, we're lucky that after that long 6-7 year NCAA stuff, that we got out of that without a single sanction. That is unbelievable. And we had guys like Jim Delaney and other alumni working with Mark Merritt and Charlotte to put together our defense that there was no violation according to the rules and the bylaws of the NCAA, and they kept hammering that away, and finally the NCAA said, you're right, so nothing. So if we had gotten some sanctions, we got a lot of bad publicity for that thing, and we still do some, we still get some, but any more sanctions might have made it tough on recruiting. So Carolina football is fallen short, no question about it, for the expectations. This season is huge expectations, with Drake May coming back, a Heisman Trophy candidate, and all of the guys like Mac keep saying we're a young team. Well, we can't be a young team if we keep putting these back-to-back recruiting classes together. So this is a huge football season. And it starts in Charlotte against South Carolina. Drake May versus Spencer Rattler against South Carolina. And that game will be a toss-up. And I don't know, ABC, prime time at night, it'll be awesome. We all should go. But after that, you look at the schedule. If we're anywhere as good as we're supposed to be, we win 9 straight games. 9 straight games. We're favored in every single game. Now, Matt can bitch and complain about how hard the schedule is, but he's talking about the last 2 games where he has to go to Clemson and go to NC State. Well, you got to play guys. You got to play people who are on your schedule, and you got to play them where the game is scheduled. So we should be 9-1 again, at least, if not 10-0. If we're anywhere as good as they say we are. So we'll see. But Drake May, after he leaves, you can't sign anybody who you think will turn out to be anything close to Drake May. So who knows what happens after Drake leaves and he goes pro, Mac might retire. And the big thing about Carolina football was always loved, great Mac came back. Delighted, I'm delighted, everybody's delighted he came back. But what's gonna be the succession plan? Everybody wanted to know that. How long is he gonna coach? And who the succession plan is. And we don't know that. The thing is, Bubba, how long Max stays, if he stays another 5 years, he's under contract now till he's 78, 2028. If he stays that long, Bubba might not be here. And who's gonna make that decision? That'll be a huge decision for Carolina, because football is really important here, and it's getting more important every single year because of the money involved. So we'll see about that. Now, okay, so I told you about the tough putt. Now let's talk a little bit about the past and the present and the future of Carolina basketball. Hubert Davis, we all love him. Great choice for the Carolina community. But a very steep learning curve. People really don't understand the difference between being an assistant coach and a head coach. And like Hubert, when he was an assistant coach, he had the greatest job in the world. Well, he had to do some coach the JV and do this and that, but all he really had to do is go and talk to recruits about how great Carolina was, because how great his experience was. And he told that like a charm, and he was in charge of recruiting some of the greatest players. When you become the head coach, it's a lot different, and most of those things you don't even know are going to happen, like the phone calls. Okay, the phone calls. So let's talk about what's going on. We have 10 months of Carolina basketball in action, coaching Hubert Davis. If that's for me, I'm busy. We have 10 months of basketball under Hubert Davis. 9 of them have been below standard. We can argue about what the standard is at Carolina, but 9 of them have been below standard. The first 4 months of last year, right? And then we made some big shots, we got hot. We pulled out the Louisville game and the Syracuse game at home. We had we had 2 victories over Duke. Now, listen to this carefully. We had 2 victories over Duke, the one at Duke and the one in the Final Four, that neither fan base will ever forget. for different reasons. Neither fan base. We can stick that in their face forever and ever. But we got the national championship game, we had a 15-point lead, and then we lost. So now, this season, the last season, 5 months, November, December, January, February, March, they were substandard. So of the 10 months that we've been active with Carolina basketball, 9 have been substandard. Now, we can argue about what the standard is. I mean, what is your standard? My standard is you got to get to the NCAA tournament every year. Okay, Sweet 16, 3 out of 4 years. You know, Final Four, you know, maybe once every 4 or 5 years, and an occasional national championship. That's the standard, and we can argue about it. But the point is, I've written books about Duke and Carolina, and so I know something about the Duke program. I watched John Shire when he took over for Coach K, and the interesting thing was when Coach K announced that he was retiring, but I'm going on my rocking chair tour around the country. He did say that John Shire was going to succeed. Remember that? And in that press conference, he said John Shire is the smartest guy in coaching. So I wrote some notes down, and then I went back and I watched it on YouTube. I wanted to make sure what he said. He didn't say John Shire is the smartest young guy in coaching, and he didn't say John Shire is the smartest guy I know in coaching. He said John Shire is the smartest guy in coaching at 33 years old, the same age that Coach K was when he got the job. So I thought that was interesting. But the difference between John Shire and Hubert Davis, in my opinion, and remember, a lot of this stuff up here is fact-based opinion by me. John Shire knew from the moment he quit playing basketball that he was going to be a basketball coach, and he was able to get back on the Duke bench. And you could see as Jeff Capel and the other coaches moved on, that he was moving into Coach K's position as successor. And he was also, I watched him, he was doing what he was supposed to do, but he was also critiquing Coach K. And said, if I'm ever going to be a head coach, maybe here, maybe somewhere else, I'm going to do a lot of stuff that Coach K did because he's the winningest coach of all time. But there's some stuff I'm not going to do. I'm going to do my own stuff. And he's already started to mention that. Like he said, I'm not doing this one and done classes anymore. When they're done with the class next year, he's not doing it anymore. I'll take some one and dones, but we're going to go to the transfer portal and we're going to look at how basketball is today, and that's what we're going to do. And I think John Shire will be very successful at Duke, and I think it's our job to make sure that we're just as successful. So the learning curve is different for Hubert. I mean, he says he always wanted to be a coach here. I mean, I'm not saying Hubert's not telling the truth, but you know, that was really never the way he acted all those years. And when Roy called him up and asked him to join his staff 9 years ago, he was flabbergasted. He didn't know that there was going to be an opening for coaching. And then when Roy retired, he hoped he would stay a couple more years. But when he did retire, that's when he got into the mix and he decided that he would try and get it. And for all the reasons, he's a great choice. But the 9 out of 10 months is the thing that's on the line this year. I wrote this morning on chapelboro.com, the great website that Jim Hebner invented at WCHL. Was that 2011, Jim, back in the day? That Elliot Cadeau that's the great point guard, who's 19, by the way. So he's the age that you would come to college as a freshman. But he reclassified, graduated from his high school class, put his graduation cap on, and he's coming to Carolina. He'll be here for the second semester when all the players have to be here. He's 6'2", and that's a stretch. He's probably closer to 6'1" or 6 feet. He's going to start with R.J. Davis, who's been playing 35 minutes a game for the last 2 years. And he is a great basketball player and a great scorer and tough as nails as a defender, but he's 6 feet tall. So Elliot Cadeau's got to start, right? I mean, he's coming with all the hype. Hubert says he's the most elite passer and playmaker that he's ever seen. So our backcourt is going to be 6'2", stretch 6'2", and 6 feet. That in college basketball today, I mean, look at pro basketball. When you watch pro basketball, everybody shoots the ball no matter what size they are. The guards are 6'8". The guards are all like Magic Johnson used to be. They're all huge. They all shoot the ball. So defensively, how are we going to do that? We have to figure that out. Hubert never practiced zone. He never played much zone. He didn't play many substitutes. It's going to be part of Hubert Davis' learning curve this year. So I'll see. You know, before the season started, I spoke a lot to groups, and they asked me about the coming season, and I said, do not get excited about the coming season because of the lightning in a bottle we caught last March, right, and won those games, and the fact that the most consequential player on our team is gone. Who was that? Brady Manick, right? He was the only easy one because he was the only one that didn't come back. But Brady Manick was the kind of guy that by the time he was shooting 40% from three-point range at the end of the year, you had to go cover him. And if he was making it, that opened the lane up for Armando Bacot. And he's got a great nose for the ball anyway. But who's going to replace Brady Manick? Now, Pete Nance, we knew was not going to be a Brady Manick type player. We hoped that he would be an all-around player and could do some other stuff. But it's the coach's job. If you lose a shooter like Brady Manick, who can go out to 3 and shoot 40% and open up the lane for Bacot, you've got to figure out another way to open up the lane for Bacot, and we never did. If you watched our team this year, the first month, all the opponents looked to see what we had. So we had another guy, a big guy, could go out and shoot the 3 and open up the lane, and it turned out that we didn't. So if that was the answer, then instead of going out and covering the 3-point shooter, we double-teamed Bacot almost every time he got the ball. And we didn't double him. They looked like we were going to double him, and they backed off and did something else. The result was Armando Bacot, who was a phenomenal kid and really a pretty good, really good college basketball player, but may never play in the NBA because his game is below the rim and it doesn't translate to the NBA, despite how great he was in college. But the difference last year was, instead of getting the ball 5 feet from the basket in an open lane, because people were going out to worry about Manick, he got the ball 10 or 12 feet from the basket, where he can't do, and I can see anything. He can do very little. He can't shoot from that distance. And when you're double teamed, the clock is running, you're trying to figure out, am I going to find somebody inside? Am I going to shoot a bad shot? What am I going to do? And sometimes Bacot's unselfish, so he gets the ball back out to the guards. And at that time, Caleb Love got a lot of criticism of how poorly he shot last year. Some of it was because he was getting the ball and racing the shot clock. He got the ball with 10 seconds left in the shot clock. So someone's got to shoot before that clock goes up. And that's what happened to us last year. We didn't have movement, I'm not a coach, so I don't know exactly what happened, but I saw the results. And if you don't have the ability to adjust and get your best players in position, that's what's going to happen. And I told people last year, I said, I don't know how good we'll be, but Manick is a huge loss. And if we can figure out how to open that lane for Bacot, then we're going to have problems. We did. All right, now, okay, the future of ACC, which might dissolve right in front of our face in a few years, because everything is about money these days. Everything is about money. And when you think about the projection for 2029 by the Big Ten and the SEC, which both have 14 teams now, with 2 more coming, with Oklahoma and Texas joining the SEC, which makes 16, and the Big Ten having Southern Cal and UCLA come in, that makes it 16. When you think about the projections that they have for their TV contracts, they're going to distribute $100 million per school per year, projected in 2029. So ACC distributes, I'm not sure, I think the Big Ten and the SEC are like 50 or 60 million now, but they're new contracts, they know what it's going to be. Our distribution now is about 30 million. So just let's say it goes up to 50 million. Well, that 50 million differential between what the SEC teams and the Big Ten teams are getting, that's going to make our university make some hard choices. There's not enough TV money left. Even ESPN is not doing the Big Ten anymore. there's just not enough money left with the network and what they're going to want, and the ACC network has been a moderate success. So if you have all of that differential, you're going to be behind in paying salaries, you're going to be behind in recruiting budgets, and you're going to be behind in the arms race facilities. You're not going to be able to build these monolithic things that they were building in the Big Ten and the SEC. So what do? Sooner or later, we're going to have to make a decision. Do we leave for the money, or do we stay and do the best we can with the money that we're getting? That's going to be a major debate. I don't know how you guys feel about it, but you know, the idea that the ACC would crumble, or the ACC would end up with Carolina and State and Virginia going to the Big Ten, and Clemson and Miami, Clemson, Florida State for sure, going to the SEC, to have these two big monster conferences. What will the ACC do? Will it end up to be a conglomeration of three conferences together? What I'm worried about are two things. I'm worried about the Duke-Carolina rivalry. I mean, we have the greatest rivalry. We are so lucky sitting in this room to be part and parcel to that rivalry, which everywhere you go in the country, everybody wants to know, what's the Duke-Carolina rivalry like? You can't explain it. Just buy, spend $1,000 and go down there and buy a ticket to a game. So what happens if we're in the Big Ten or the SEC or whatever? Does the Duke-Carolina rivalry go away? Yeah, maybe we play them one time in a neutral court. I don't know, but it won't be the same. The other thing is what about college athletics? You know, democracy is the great American experiment, and it's been pretty successful to this point. We don't know how long it's going to last. But college athletics is the great experiment too, because there's no other country in the world that has athletic teams tied up with universities. You know, kids in Europe, if they're great, they play club soccer or whatever they play, and then they turn pro. But here, everything that we have is tied up with the colleges. So what does that do to all of the Olympic sports? What does that do to the ability to field teams? And we have the most amazing Olympic program here. I mean, look at the national championships we win. Look at the great athletes we have. Look at the facilities. I was at the Tuning Tennis Center watching the NCAA a couple of weeks ago. Unbelievable what they've done for facilities here. All of that's in jeopardy of going away if you don't get enough money to continue to feed that. Now, I'm not saying all the sports would go away, but it's a matter of cutting. Now, at Duke, back in Tom Butter's day, when he was the athletic director, the guy in Duke raises money for scholarships like the Rams Club does. But Duke, it costs 4 times as much Duke scholarship as Carolina. So Tom Butters went to all the coaches and said, I can't raise enough money to fund all 22 sports I think they had at the time. So I'm only going to fund 14. Now, you guys, I want you to keep having the sports, but you're probably not going to get any money. So play them as club sports, do what you want. If you need to get another job, get another job. But we're going to go with 14 sports. And the thing about that is that the biggest schools that can afford to do 28 sports like we have, they don't even do. They do the absolute minimum, NCAA minimum of 18 sports. It used to be 16, now it's 18. Texas and Alabama, those schools don't have 28 sports like we have because we're a broad-based program. We want to give as many kids a chance to play varsity sports as possible. So it's all about the money. Where will it be? Now, my idea, I'll give you my idea, has always been this, that we have what's called a super football league. 64 teams are invited to join a super football league on criteria that's set up by the NCAA. I mean, you know, Alabama, Tennessee, those schools, they get in automatically, but other schools who have good history, they have big stadium, they get good TV ratings, they get in as the 64. And those 64 teams are in the Super League, but they stay in their conferences, right? And they play 8 games amongst each other, and at the end of the season, they get into an NFL-like playoff. It'll be just like the NFL with, you know, conferences, East, West, divisions, all that kind of stuff. And I don't know how many of those teams will make the playoffs, but it'll be as many as they can possibly get in there. But the point is, if you do that, you save college athletics as it is, because like in the ACC, Duke probably's not getting in because they don't have 30,000 people in their stadium. BC ain't getting in. There's no way they're getting in. probably Syracuse is not getting in, and Wake Forest will have a hard time getting in because, you know, they don't have those standards. But those teams could still stay in the ACC, and if they had to add a few teams to make it a full football conference, and then they'll be playing 8 games against super teams, and they could have a chance to upset them and ruin it for the big teams. But if you bring in a Coastal Carolina and an East Carolina and so forth, and get into football players, you can still play for the ACC football championship. It's still something to play for. And if the bowls don't ruin the whole themselves by by becoming the venues for all of these playoffs, it would still be a big thing to, you know, win an ACC championship and go to a bowl game. Now, is it the big dog? Is it the biggest team? No, but it saves what we do now, and most important, it saves the the Olympic sports, and it saves the NCAA basketball tournament, because you think if the SEC and the Big Ten and some other major conferences, they get all the best teams, you think that they're not going to want eventually to have the NCAA basketball tournament too? You know, who's going to keep a lot of doing that? Because they have the money to increase the TV rights fees for that and more. So we're looking at the whole structure of college athletics and the future of it. And right now, the Big Ten and the SEC, they're calling all the shots. And they probably, you know, they'll end up probably with 20 schools in each league before it's over. But what happens to the rest of them, I don't know, and it's really a shame. And in these meetings, you can imagine, you know, what these athletic directors and presidents are wondering about where we're going to be, how much money, and can we sustain ourselves with less money, unless we admit that we're kind of in an the upper division, but a second tier of the upper division, and we're going to try and do the best we can. So that's my hope. Talked about the game, talked about the football, talked about basketball. Now, Hubert's future. We talked about the standard, whatever it is. We have a standard here. Can Hubert meet that standard? He hasn't so far. You know, he had a great run, but it was lightning in a bottle. And who doesn't think that that was lightning in a bottle? Who doesn't? Okay? Because we had great players, they made big shots, and they won the 2 most important games maybe in our history. But the standard overall is not being met. Now, whatever that standard is, whoever decides what it is, my belief is that if Hubert Davis doesn't meet that standard, UNC won't have to fire him. He loves this school so much that if he's not doing the job in terms of meeting that standard, he'll recognize it and he'll walk away. That's just my opinion. Don't post on Facebook that Archansky said Hubert Davis, blah, blah, blah. That's my opinion, and that comes from his deep, abiding love for this school. Okay, that's all I got. Questions?
All right, with all the uncertainty with the transfer portal, I mean, I feel for these coaches. How do they proceed not knowing how to plan for a team and positions and the future?
Well, it's the most, I can't think of the word, but it's really unfortunate that the transfer portal came in at the same time as NIL. I mean, you know, you hear about unintended consequences. How somebody didn't look at that and say, if these 2 things happen at the same time, you're telling me that the NIL is going to be, you can't pay for play? I mean, 2 years ago, Mac Brown told me we lost 7 guys to the transfer portal. I'm recruiting some transfers to come in, and the first question they asked me is how much NIL money I'm getting. And Max says, well, you know, we have a good NIL program. You get into marketing classes, they hook you up with businesses, blah, blah, blah. And the recruit said, no. My parents told me to ask you how much NIL money I'm getting because the last 3 schools I visited put a figure on the table. And that's where it starts. So the whole idea of that it is ridiculous. I don't know the answer to what coaches do. The coaches who are at schools who are doing anything they want, they're doing fine, right? The problem is you can do anything out there. The schools can do anything because no one tells them that it's illegal. There's nobody, you know, enforcing it. There's nobody monitoring it. And so I don't know where that's going. Yeah.
2 questions. First is the number of kids that transferred out of Carolina basketball is that related to Hubert, the lack of playing time, that, you know, the substitute, or is it just happenstance? And the second thing is this ACC problems. I mean, this is all tied to a 20-year contract, I think they've signed. I mean, who signs a 20-year contract in such a fluid environment? Who approved that? You know,
Well,
can they get out of it?
our buddy John Swaffer did that after Maryland left, because he was scared that other people were going to bolt like Maryland did. So he did this thing called grant of rights, which meant if you left while you were still in the league, you didn't get any more rights fee distribution. You had to pass it back to the conference while you're in that waiting period. So, I mean, it looked like a good move then, but it looks like a terrible move now. I mean, Jim Delaney is a good friend, he's an alumni of UNC. He was a commissioner of the Big Ten. He retired, got a $20 million bonus because he increased the Big Ten's take over however long it was, to $200 million in his contract, that he gets 10% of that. And the way he did that was by signing short-term TV contracts. So he knew what the market was, and when the market changed, he didn't have very long to go before another negotiation was going on. So it seems like they're going to be able to get out of it. There's a couple of legal snafus that happen, and you know, somebody may put it to the test, but that turned out to be a terrible idea. The transfers, and they had to be tied to playing time. You know, I love Hubert Davis. He's the best coach for us. But last year, he talked so positively about guys who didn't even play. You had to worry that that resulted in phone calls. For example, Kerwin Walton. He said Kerwin Walton last season, Roy's last season, was one of the best outside shooters in the country, right? And I think he can be one of the best this year, his first year. But Hubert played Walton 4 minutes a game. So we knew that, but I'm sure one of the phone calls that he's getting is from Mr. and Mrs. Walton going, you said my son's one of the best shooters in the country, he didn't get in the game last night, you know? And that's something that Hubert is learning, you know, on the way. But the idea that guys don't play when they're expecting to play, and last year we had way better, I think, way better bench material than we had the year before. The one that I was watching all year long that I was going, oh, put him in, let him play, is Tyler Nickel. Tyler Nickel was Tyler Nickel scored more points in high school basketball than anybody who's ever played in the state of Virginia. Now, when you think about Ronald Curry and Moses Malone and everybody else who's been in that state, Tyler Nickel scored more points than anybody who ever played in Virginia high school basketball. And you don't even put him in the game. And when you put him in the game, you don't leave him in the game so he can get comfortable. I said, I don't know who's going to start, but that guy's in the transfer portal, and I don't even think they had anything to do with money. He might, Virginia Tech probably did. But you'll see. You'll think of me next year when Tyler Nickel comes in here, or we go up there and he hangs 20 on us. Because, he's a great kid, but boy, he's got a bone to pick with us. And we, especially in a season where we're, our chances were dwindling as the season went on. To me, that's when you start playing for the next year. You start playing to keep people happy. But the other guys, NIL, I'm sure was, I'm sorry about Caleb. Caleb loves a great guy, by the way. He's a great guy. I know Allison Friedman very well. She's the executive director of the Carolina Performing Arts. She did the video. Who saw the video of Caleb with the Alvin Ailey dancer? Did you all see that? Wasn't that phenomenal? She said working with Caleb Love was so great. He was so cooperative. He was so interested in the movements of the dancers, and the dancers, mocked his movement. If you haven't seen that, pull it up on YouTube. But Caleb's a great guy. But you knew, didn't we all know that it was just turned into a bad marriage, and he had to try something else, and we had to try something else. So, and I don't know what happened in Michigan. I don't know if it was NIL or whether he really. It's hard for me to believe that our credits don't transfer to Ann Arbor. I mean, they're a good school. Come on, seriously. So I think each case, Rob, is Justin McCoy. He wasn't going to play anywhere, so he went to Hawaii for a year. Who else left? Styles. Well, they were looking at. They knew, and I think our coaches were open. They knew who we were. You're looking at Harrison Ingram and Jalen Withers and Cormac Ryan. So I think the guys that we coming in are better, and they're certainly more experienced, and I hope they're tougher. Because one thing we weren't last year was very tough, and that makes Roy Williams, spit up his cornflakes in the morning. You got to be tough to play basketball, college basketball. Anything else?
All right, maybe one more question, two. We got to wrap up close to 2.
Okay.
Just a quick one.
Is that Bill Whitley?
Ted Keith.
Oh, Ted Keith.
Hello, Art.
Oh, I got you now. You were sitting next to him, so I thought it was Bill Whitley. Hi, Ted.
Hello, Art. If and when Hubert walks away, or is told to walk away, knowing the program as you do, and being as you do, and Roy as you do, will the next Carolina basketball coach be a member of the Carolina basketball family, yes or no, and should he or her, yes or no?
Yes, if he's the best guy for the job. No, if there's nobody out there who's the best guy. Because you're into nut busting time at that point. You're into serious business. You're into a program. Look, how many colleges in this country have had one Hall of Fame coaching era? How many? Anybody who's been in the Hall of Fame or going to the Hall of Fame, they have. How many schools have had 2 Hall of Fame coaching eras? I can't think of anybody. I mean, who did? We had 2, so that's a standard that we're all used to. We're all used to Dean Smith and Roy Williams. So, and they say about athletic directors make one mistake, and they better rectify that mistake right away. Now, we've had some mistakes repeatedly here over the years that have gotten me in trouble in the past, but that's a decision that'll be probably, and I hope it never happens. I hope Hubert stays for 12 years and does a great job. But if that happened, that would be a decision that would be really, really consequential. What do you think?
Yeah. Put me on the spot, Art. So, if you all want to read my private text messages with my friends, we talk about this every day for the last 3 years, you're welcome to. But I think that all the words you said are words that I've been saying for years. And Carolina standard is being a Hall of Fame level coach. And if you don't reach that level, I don't care who you are, you can't stay. And if you can reach that level, it would be great if you went to UNC. But if you didn't, I don't care. I just want Carolina to win. How long do you have to do it? I love you. I love you.
I mean, I think he has a fair time. He's got a 6-year contract. If he doesn't get to the NCAA tournament for 4 of those 6 years, he's not, in my opinion, he's not going to be here for 6 years. He's not going to wait till we fire him. That's my opinion. Because that's the standard. That's the standard that we're used to. And that's the standard that Carolina basketball deserves. And that's why Cormac, Ryan, and Harrison Ingram, and all those guys are coming this year to make a good Carolina basketball program great. And we didn't create the standard, did we? Like the standard we had on the court that night? All right, I got one other thing for you. I'm going to give this book away and I'm going to sign it. 1969 ACC tournament in Charlotte. Dick Grubar was hurt. We were behind. I was covering for the Daily Tar Heel. I'm sitting on the baseline table, and the Duke cheerleaders are sitting right in front of me. They're squatting right in front of me. And they are talking about who's driving to College Park next year, and the next week for the Eastern Region. Who's driving? So they're up by 10 with 10 minutes to go in the game. And that's when Charlie Scott said, and now Dean Smith, to that point, I never saw him do this, but said, do what you want, Charlie. And Charlie said, give me the ball and everybody get out of the way. We end up winning the game. So the question is, how many points did Charlie Scott score in both halves of that game? That was our 3rd straight ACC tournament championship that turned into our 3rd straight Final Four.
22.
I'm not going to ask you to, because you know, and you have this book. So.
16.
Anybody else know?
22.
23. First half and second half.
16.
Which half?
Both halves.
No. That's not even close. Okay. Who knows?
14.
All right, Ted.
I think we get 40 for the game, 28 in the second half, 12 in the first half.
Bingo. So you have to give this book to Bill Whitney, okay? Thank you very much for letting me come.
as a lifelong Tar Heel, we have a gift for Art. We'd like to present one of our members as a charity that raises money for children's education in Africa. Have a good weekend.
He's not just a regular guy. That was not easy. Yeah, you too.
Hey, how are you? Good, how are you?
Great, thank you. Have a good weekend.
You too, sir.
They freeze you these
Alright, have a nice weekend. Oh, I'll see you tomorrow.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're Toastmasters, yeah?
Have you got a roll?
Yeah. A hard count.